All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So my name is Eleonora, and I'm a program manager for Patient-Focused Medicines Development, PFMD, which is a global multi-stakeholder coalition by providing a platform for the global patient engagement community to connect and co-create or co-elevate resources. So we are very glad to have you here. I would love to know who's in the room today. So if you would please like to share maybe your name and where you come from and your background in the chat. We would love to read who we have here. We know we have a very diverse audience today. We know we expect people coming from all over the globe with a big focus on Europe and Japan. So we would be very curious to know where are you coming from, where are you listening in from, and what would you like maybe to share in this session. Anything that you would like to share with us, it's welcome in the chat. Thank you so much. I see you guys are starting, and I see a few new names and a few familiar faces, which is very nice. So the first thing that I would like you to know is live translation is available through an AI-powered tool at this session. My colleague Matt has launched and will keep on launching a tool that is called Wordly. You can open Wordly, a pop-up will appear on your screen or in the chat. And through Wordly, after selecting the language of the translation, you will be able to read everything that we are sharing as speakers and moderators, or anything that anybody will share in this meeting. You'll be able to read it in your preferred language. In case the chat disappears for you when you activate Wordly, don't worry about it. You can still interact with all of us through the chat. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a control bar, as you see in the screenshot on the slide. And through that control bar, you will be able to switch between the chat and the apps. So the apps will be where you will find Wordly, which is an external app, again, that allows us to have AI-powered translation. If you need support, please write in the chat, and we have a full team ready to help you and support you in any way that we can. So moving to the next slide, we know that we have a few people that may be new to PEOF, and so we thought it may be nice to welcome you officially to the Patient Engagement Open Forum community, and we wanted just to give you a short introduction on what PEOF is. So the Patient Engagement Open Forum is a multi-stakeholder platform that allows for the global patient engagement community to meet and co-create the future of patient engagement. How do we do this? Is through a year-long co-creation that happens through virtual sessions like the one that we're just having today. And then we meet once a year in person for a small global gathering that allows us to have 3 days of deep dive into patient engagement, and then help us inform any upcoming co-creation touchpoint that we will organize for the community. PEOF is really your platform. So PEOF is all about the community and the people that join. It is co-creation focused and it is patient-centric. These are the two key things that I would like to highlight. So PEOF is really your space and your platform to share any session, any PEOF opportunity really is successful thanks to the collective community and the sharings of everyone. And the output of this session will really come from your insights and expertise. So that's what we're looking for. That's what we would hope to get in this session. We would love for you to engage and share your experience. So at every PEOF session, we have a few behaviors that we usually ask people to respect. Somehow, the first thing is being present and engaged. Here, I just would like to highlight, we acknowledge engagement comes in different forms. So please don't feel forced to speak up. Feel free to share anything in the way that is more comfortable to you. Keep your camera on or camera off as you feel more comfortable. Feel free to raise your hand and speak to us, but also to type in the chat or to use extra tools that we will provide to make sure that we can capture your inputs, even if you might not feel comfortable sharing. So we accept any contribution as long as you're comfortable and as long as PEOF is a platform for you. We will ask you to keep your mic muted just to ensure that everybody can hear speakers. Please do feel free to engage as much as possible. Do feel free to comment and share your thoughts. The session will be recorded, as you might have noticed. And again, again, this is really your platform. So let's make this workshop interesting together. So moving into this session specifically, let's start contextualizing it a bit. So this is an extremely important session that will tackle the importance of patient engagement into clinical trials. And this is a topic that is dear to the PEOF community already. So today, thanks to the input of two people that are part of the community, that are Laureline and Beatrice, they will introduce themselves very soon. We are bringing to you a session that starts from a research project that allowed to compare the levels of patient engagement between Europe and Japan, just to understand the current state, not really to draw any conclusion, but more to understand where are we starting from and what can we learn from each other. So that was really the scope of the first phase. And we're going to have the honor as the PEOF community to learn about the initial insights of these projects, which Laureline will share with us very soon. So then this PEOF session is pivotal within the project because building on the insights that were found in the research, we would like to ask you to help us understand what is an ideal level of patient engagement in the clinical trials pathway. Of course, ensuring that patient engagement happens meaningfully at every single step of the process. And we really want to hear from you. We want to hear your opinion, hear your experiences and your thoughts, because this will help inform the second phase of the research, which will focus on demonstrating the value of patient engagement and refining this newly developed tool that allows you to quickly and easily self-assess patient engagement and demonstrate the value of patient engagement externally. So I'm not gonna spoil anything else because I'm sure our speakers will walk you through this. For the agenda of today, we will start from a presentation with Laureline that will walk us through the insights of the research, and then we will hear from a distinguished panel a few insights from very diverse perspectives on the importance of patient engagement and how to make sure that patient engagement is not just a checkbox, but it's a meaningful interaction that actually has long-term impact. And then we will hear it from you. And that's, again, the focal point of the session. So we'll move into smaller groups and ask you to share your experience and opinion so that then we can consolidate your insights and work on the second. And Laureline and Beatrice mainly can work on the second phase of the project, starting from what the PEOF community co-created. So here's in the next slide our distinguished panel of speakers. I'm not going to take time now to let them introduce themselves, but I will make sure to give each one of them a moment to say hi and welcome everyone as soon as the moment comes for them to speak. And with this being said, I'm going to leave the floor to our first speaker, who's Laureline. So Laureline, I would please ask you to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and go ahead with your presentation.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Laureline Gatelier. So introducing myself. So I'm from the National Cancer Center, Japan. I'm working on international cancer control and also patient engagement. And I'm also patient advocate. And my passion is making research more aligned with real patient needs. I also lived quite a lot of, I'm European, but I've lived a lot of my life in Japan. So I kind of understand the cultures in the two regions as much as possible. So next slide, please. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm setting the stage here. Why are we here? Why did we think about this? Before going in depth in the detail, what Eleona was talking about, I would just like take 1 or 2 minutes just to say what is a clinical trial and why does patient engagement matters in clinical trials. I'm saying that because I know a lot of you know PEOF, know this patient engagement open forum. A lot of you are very patient engagement focused, but some people may not know. So let me shortly explain it here. Like a clinical trial is a research study involving people designed to explore new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat illnesses. And then it's very important part of the process to put drugs on the market, new drugs on the market, which is very important, especially where not sufficient drugs are available, like, for example, rare cancers. And also participation in clinical trials is, like is available for patients, and then they can join voluntarily. And then their voices, patient voices and experience can help shape clinical trials that matter more to real lives. I think quite a lot of you know. So why does patient engagement matters in clinical trial? They bring real life experience that can help make trials more relevant for patient is also, though I'm not going to go through everything, but what is some points that are very important also for researchers and for patients and for the industry is that they can support faster recruitment, better retention, and faster application to new drugs. And this kind of motto, patient engagement, being important in clinical trials, a lot of us know the fact. Then I will go to, just before going to the next slide, let me tell you, so why our project is, how was this project put here? It's a project that was meant to compare European and Japan patient engagement in clinical trials. So that was about the comparison. We were supported by the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science. It's a 4 years project. We worked together with a representative from AMED, with the academia in Europe and Japan, with the industry, with funding organization to reach where we are here. I'm not naming everyone, but it's a nice outcome. Next slide, please. Okay, it's just the history of patient engagement in clinical trials. In the West, it's quite long. You see, started in the 1970s, and then the 80s, you have a big, quite a lot of people know about how the HIV people were activists to make advance the cause of patient engagement in clinical trials. And then later on in the 90s and the 20s, there were also more and more happening in Europe, like in the UK, involving Evolve, like supporting public involvement in healthcare. Then you have also EMA, the European Medicine Agency, that also got involved, integrating patient perspective in clinical research. In 2014, the EUPATI, European Patient Therapeutic Innovation, allowed also to officially train European patients to become patient experts. And then more and more is happening in the 20s. I'm not going to explain further, but let me move to the Japan side. It started later. It's more like from 2016, and then something very official in 2018 with the Japan Clinical Oncology Group, which is academia-led group for clinical trials. And then 2018 further, the JPMA, Japan Pharmaceutical Manufacturer Association, also issued guidance on patient centricity. You also have AMED, the Japan Medical Agency, that's funding projects, also created guidebook. And then PMDA, the Japan regulator, also launched the patient engagement working group, and more is happening. So now it's a real momentum. So much is happening here and there. So next slide, please. Why? So I'm talking about the challenge. Why is measuring patient engagement so complex? I'm sharing here 3 challenges. Patient engagement practices vary across country and clinical trial design. Also, there is a lack of standard definition and evaluation method for the patient engagement. And then there is also a need for systematic approach to assess patient engagement levels in research. There are 2 questions I would like you to keep in mind while I'm talking during this whole session. How do we ensure patient engagement isn't just a checkbox exercise in many countries, institutions? Checkbox, done. Or also, how can we compare patient engagement across regions, across institutions, in a fair and meaningful way? So these are 2 questions that are a bit different. Please keep them in mind. Next slide, please. So the original idea was to compare the 2 countries, but looking for tools, looking for ways to compare these 2 very different cultural regions, we couldn't find a simple tool that would help create to concretely compare. So we created a matrix with an x-axis and a y-axis. X is the 8 steps of the research, and the Y is the level of engagement. I'll talk about it in the next slide. So we have this access to know where and how much, to which extent is patient engagement occurring. We needed to test that simple tool. We cannot just create a tool without testing it. So what did we do? We contacted principal investigators of academic clinical trials, asking them to make a self-evaluation of their patient engagement for specific clinical trials. That was in Europe and Japan. We selected these two regions. And how were the clinical trials selected? They were selected from public databases. In Europe, it's EUDRA-CT, and in Japan is UMIN and JRCT. The period of selection was from 2018 to 2022. So what we expect as an outcome, the role of this tool and applying it is enable researchers to evaluate and improve engagement strategies. And then on the other side, allowing policymakers to track patient engagement trends and address gaps, and also help patients and advocates understand and engagement, where engagement is happening, and then to promote in the right direction. So it's not just it's not just about saying one region is better than the other. That's not at all what we expect from this. It's about learning from each other. So next slide, please. So more into detail about this very simple tool. So this tool, you see, it was an adaptation from the practical roadmap from Jan Geisler. You will see him later in the panel. So we have 4 major arrows going in the direction from research priorities. The next step is when the research priorities being well thought and defined, then we go into the setting the protocol design, then so research design and planning, and then research conduct and operation, and then at the last arrow is dissemination, communication, application. You can see like in each of the arrow, we selected 2 specific points where we ask the principal investigator whether they put patient engagement, and if yes, at which level. So you see the first one is setting research priorities. The second is fundraising for research. These are in the research priorities. Then protocol synopsis, protocol design, followed by informed consent. That's in the second arrow. The third arrow is ethical review. And next one is investigators meeting. And the last arrow is study result reporting, dissemination, communication. And the last one is application to authorities. Then at the bottom, you see 5 engagement levels from no engagement to co-creation. Can you go to the next slide, please? That was also extracted from a available manuscript from mainly Marie-Pascale Paumet. So here you see, it's kind of visual. You see the 4 steps at the bottom, research priority, etc. And you see now the levels of engagement. So no engagement. So the PI, the principal investigator, didn't engage the patient representative. Remember that the patient representative is not the patient, is a patient that can understand what is a research, what is a protocol, and that kind of. So the second line is the principal investigator, the researcher, considered to include the patient representative. Then the step above is informed or consulted. And then the 4th level is actively involved. So more proactively, including the patient representative. And the highest level is co-creation. That means like it's working together, like as equals to review that specific step. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. This is, so I showed you the tool. Now I show you what we could extract from the tool. You see on the left, you see Europe. On the right, you see Japan. You may like to look at the red and the green, and then you may think, oh, it's so different there, Japan and Europe. That's not really, I would like to also to emphasize the fact that within each region, there are big inconsistencies. with the result here, you can see like, the darker green is co-creation, then a bit lighter is actively involved, and then the very light green is informed or consult, and then the shallow red is considered, and the dark red is didn't involve. So you can see from here, for example, when you look all the greens, you see that in Europe, green is as step 4. It's both as step 4, which is informed consent. So the informed consent was very well considered. That's the highest step where patient advocate, patient representative are involved. But then here you see that more than half of the yes of the involvement was inform and consult, while less than half of those who said yes actively involved patient representative. So it's more like not measure, you can consider like the difference. Is the same for the next one. I'm looking at Europe first. So the step 5, which is involving patient representative in ethics committee, here again. And then the next afterward, that is engaging patient in protocol design, protocol writing, which is the step number 3. So these are the 3 major steps where patients were mostly consulted in Europe. You see still actively involvement in informed consult and consent, step 4, and in step 5, ethics committee. So you see like this kind of inconsistency in Europe. And you also see inconsistencies in Japan. In Japan, the trend is not the same. No, I mean, the numbers are not the same, but the trend is kind of comparable. You also have more patient engagement in informed consent, in ethics committee, and you have like more involvement also that is in the dissemination in both regions. And then when you look at the very dark, it's where you have co-creation. It's very shallow. There are not so many, but you see like the very dark, you see in protocol creation in Europe, and you see it also in the it's investigators meeting, and you see quite a bit also in dissemination. That's in Europe, and in Japan it's also quite high in the dissemination. That's the step almost at the end. So you see like the kind of this quite visual. The next slide, please. Now when you go to, so it's a bit, you focus on the research priorities. You see research priorities is, that's the very first step. Research priorities has been shown also that putting patient representative in the research priority phase helps to select the direction where patients consider it's important to move forward one specific drug. And in this case, it's kind of limited if you compare with informed consent, which is a more later stage of the research. Okay, the next one, please. And then now you can look also the informed consent. Just I mentioned it. Yes, it's quite high, but we would expect, yes, in both, as I just mentioned. You can go to next one, please. And then dissemination is also an interesting one. Dissemination is very important. It is known, in patient engagement related activities that giving to the patient back the results in a lay summary is something important, but patient support is also quite limited here. There are things that we can see here. It's very visual. Okay, can we go to next one, please? And the next one is another point of view of the result. The next one is how much one PI, principal investigator, to how many steps did that researcher involve a patient advocate in among the steps. You see in Europe, upper place, so you see engagement versus no engagement. In green, in blue, you have some engagement, was 80% for the researchers, while in Japan it was half. It was 40% of the researchers. So you see the number of physician that included patient was much less in Japan and than in Europe. And then a very, very interesting point below is how many principal investigators involved patient in more than 3 steps of the research. In Europe, it was 10% of them. So consistently, it's about consistency in involving patients in representative in the clinical trials. 10% in Europe, and then 3% in Japan. So maybe next slide, please. So yeah, so what I can say from this, patient engagement here is being seen very visual and kind of the word, I don't know if it's good to say like like it's it's not like very standardized. Here and there, you don't know how and why, and then, but you can visualize where and when it happened and then at which level. Co-creation was very limited. It's more often that patients were informed and consulted. So how can we where can we go from here? How could the tool be used moving forward? So there are different things that we can think about. Collaborate with major stakeholders such as patients and patient advocates, policymakers, regulators, industry, and also expand in other regions or refine the method based from real world feedback. So then my questions back to you. What aspects of PE, patient engagement, do you think need the most improvement? And then how can we use these insights to make patient engagement most meaningful? So from here, I would like to hand to Eleonora.
Thank you so much, Laurelyn. Thank you so much for the presentation as well. And I see the audience appreciated and is extremely curious about what you shared and to learn more. I think this was a great way to set the stage and let us know what you've been working on and what are the key insights, and a great way to then introduce the panel discussion. I see there are questions and comments in the chat that, Laurelyn, I'm sure you're super interested in reading through. So for everyone, I'm sure Laurelyn now will start reading the messages and try to reply. If we don't get back to you directly, we will make sure to include replies in the session output, so that everyone gets the information that you're asking for. So please feel free to keep on populating the chat. We'll try to keep up with what you share there, but we will also make sure that we address that. So let's now move into the panel discussion. I serve here just as a quick transition and just to help moderate this space. But of course, as mentioned in the beginning, we have an amazing lineup of panelists that will help us go deeper and broader into the topic of patient engagement into clinical trials, exploring it from very diverse heads and expertise. A few of them represent regulators, a few of them represent patient advocates and patient organizations. However, I've had the luck of meeting each and every one of our panelists, and I can assure you all of them have very diverse perspectives within their own profile that they can bring, and very diverse experiences that allow them to have a very comprehensive overview of the importance of patient engagement in clinical trials. And so I'm very grateful and honored to introduce you to this distinguished list of panelists that will help us go deeper into what is the importance of patient engagement in clinical trials. I'm going to ask each one of you to please briefly introduce yourself to our audience. So Sean, may I ask you to go first and introduce yourself, and then we can keep the same order in the slide.
Okay. Hello to European people, and good konbanwa in Japanese. Good evening to Japanese people. I'm Shun Tezuka. I'm a medical officer of PMDA, Japanese regulatory agency. At PMDA, I lead the patient engagement working group. Lauren have introduced, and I am a member of expert working group of ICH E22. E22 deal with general consideration for patient preference studies. I've been working at PMDA for about 5 years. My main work at PMDA is review of new drug and medical device in oncology and gastrointestinal field, because my background is as a medical doctor specialized in oncology, gastroenterology, and endoscopy, especially in liver, bile duct, and pancreas. Sorry for long talk. By the way, I'm looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Caroline.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Carolyn Taylor. I'm the founder and executive director of Global Focus on Cancer. I have lived experience of ovarian and endometrial cancers. My focus of work looks to advance equitable people-centered care, particularly in low-resource settings, through advocacy, psychosocial support, and capacity building, and really looking to ensure that where you live doesn't determine what care you receive. I'm also a steering committee member for the WHO on meaningful engagement of people with lived experience. It's a pleasure to be with you all.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here as well. Very nice to see some familiar names and faces on the screen. So my name is Maria Mavris, and I work as patient liaison at the European Medicines Agency. My background is really as a scientist, but I kind of discovered patient work when I worked in a CRO of oncology focused. And then I started working in the European Rare Disease Organization, EURORDIS. And this is how I got in touch with the European Medicines Agency as well, where I started here first as an expert on secondment and now have joined the team and as a patient liaison integrating patient views and patient voices all along the regulatory process. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah,
super nice to meet you all. My name is Jan. I've been a cancer survivor now for 24 years. I still have active disease. I've been on phase 1-2 clinical trials myself. I've been engaged in patient engagement, patient advocacy, probably for about the same time, trying to push forward the patient voice in R&D, in policy, and different functions. I'm the CEO of PADvocates, which is a think tank on patient engagement. I'm also the ex-director of the European Patients Academy, EU Party, and a board member of PFMD. I'm also serving on an ethics committee as a lay person, which also gives me insights into a lot of studies, study designs, good designs, bad designs, no patient engagement. And that's why this topic of patient engagement in R&D is really close to my heart. So thank you so much for inviting me today.
thank you. And last but not least, Hiromi, you need to unmute yourself first.
皆さん、こんばんは。私は日本語でご挨拶させていただきます。私は川村ひろみと申します。私は日本で子宮頸がん、主に女性のがんのサポートグループのリーダーをしております。で、そこでは2013年から患者参画をできるような仕組みを考えまして、で、患者さんたちと一緒に研究、臨床試験なんかの意見を言えるような体制を作っています。そして、オンラインで、今現在は、医療関係者の方たちの、研究のサポートをするような、基盤を作っているところです。で、今日は、非常に緊張しておりますが、皆さんとセッションを楽しめることを、期待しております。よろしくお願いします。
Thank you so much. So everyone, as you may have noticed, Wordly helped us. Hiromi-san is a well-seasoned patient engagement advocate in Japan. She focuses mainly on cervical cancer, but not only, she's been working for decades on the patient engagement and involvement, especially in Japan. So please remember to use Wordly to understand. I see the translation was quite accurate. Please let us know if you would like wrap up of an intervention. And likewise, if anybody would like to share in Japanese, feel free to do so. Wordly will work for you as well. Thank you so much, Hiromi-san, for introducing yourself. I'll give you the word later on. So let's get started with the panel discussion. I know you're all very eager to hear more by our amazing panelists. I see there is a question in the chat. So let me just remind everyone, Wordly is a tool. You will receive a pop-up either in your chat or in your screen that asks you to open Wordly. To switch between your chat and Wordly, in the lower bar of your Zoom screen, please click on Apps, and that will open a different chat that will translate everything that the speakers are saying. If you have issues, please type in the chat. So I'm gonna ask for Ian to please help us kickstart this panel discussion. So here, Ian, I know you are not a new face here for the PEOF community. So I guess it's a nice transition for everyone to start hearing our panelists a bit more. So I know from your experience, you're very well of the involvements of developments of patient involvement in clinical trials, especially in Europe. And we've discussed these can be attributed both to community advocacy, but also to legislative changes that actually supported community involvement. So how do we build awareness and make sure that patient engagement is not just a checkbox? What is your recommendation to ensure that patient engagement is meaningful, and how do we take advantage of the current momentum and the growing momentum, especially within the European region?
Yeah, super. Thank you so much. And I think it's so important that you're saying patient engagement should never be a tick box exercise, because we see a lot of talk about, patient centricity and everybody's so patient focused. But in the end, this only works if it has an influence on decisions that are being made, influenced by regulators, influenced by clinicians or investigators, influence on industry decisions and so on. So we always need to think about how does what the patient community says change decisions that people have. And that requires a lot. That requires, of course, first of all, mutual trust. So we need to work together. It requires education. So people are being trained how to engage with clinicians, researchers, industry, patients, from whatever side you look at it. We need to discuss about the value that it creates, because people will only involve patients if it creates value. And it requires rules, because in the end, healthcare and research are rule-based and data-based and evidence-based. And only if we look at those, it will actually work. And as you were mentioning, legislative changes. I mean, Europe has a history of probably about 20 years of patient and public involvement, starting in the UK, and later on it spread all around. The HIV community started it. But of course, industry and regulators base their decisions on, let's say, frameworks in which they operate. And that's why the European legislation for clinical trials, which was passed in 2014 and was actually put into effect in 2021, actually, let's say, one surviving clause that we patients advocated very heavily for is that sponsors need to disclose whether they have involved patients in the protocol design. And even though this is not yet many people look at it, I can tell from my role in an ethics committee, we look at that. So we look through the protocol, we see in which section of the protocol the sponsor talks about patient engagement. And we discuss about that in our ethics committee, whether we feel if there's difficult risk-benefit decisions or if there's ethical questions and so on. We look at, has the patient community be part of those conversations? And if not, probably we look more closely than if we feel the patient community has had a meaningful impact. And I think this is widely acknowledged. So in November last year, the ICH, which is sounds very complex, the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals in Human Use, sounds very complex, but it's more or less an international committee that looks at the rules under which clinical trials are being implemented. They actually released version 3 of their guideline, and this also has now a provision on patient involvement in protocol development, and also the Declaration of Helsinki, to which all researchers need to abide and need to follow, also has a clause on patient involvement. So I think the rules are increasingly clear, but of course, rules are rules. You need to train people, and that's why I think it's super important that we train everyone on every side, that there's trust, that people understand how they can interact, what the value is, and so on. And there's been huge amounts of work done by EU PADI, by PPI Japan, by JPAC, by PFMD and others, to train everyone on all sides to actually make patient engagement happen, because you need to know the rules and you need to know how to apply them in practice in concrete trials. And that's so important that we're discussing it today in that roadmap that Laureline has presented, that we actually have practical examples how to do it.
All right. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much. I think there are several topics that help us introduce also the next speakers. I'm going to pick up on a couple of points that you mentioned to introduce our next panelists, but then we will definitely follow up also on the regulatory experience specifically when we move forward in the panel discussion. There are a couple of things that you mentioned in the beginning around how important it is when we talk about patient engagement to start by listening to the patient community and making sure that we equip them with the proper tools to get engaged and we equip them with the tools to also help them demonstrate the value of patient engagement. And this helps introduce our next speaker, Hiromi, who has been a patient advocate for years and has been working for exactly helping the Japanese community being involved and engaged. And she's been working to provide the right tools to the Japanese community to be engaged. So Hiromi-san, I know you've been a strong advocate for patient engagement and that your work has already contributed a lot into shaping the clinical trials protocols and processes, especially in Japan. Could you share briefly any concrete example of where patient engagement made a difference based on your experience in clinical research? And I would also ask you to please contextualize any example within the Japanese unique cultural and institutional environment. So do you think that a tool to self-assess could help? Do you think there is any other support need within the community? How do we grow patient engagement practices?
はい、非常にそのツールっていうのは重要だと思います。で、今現在、日本では患者参画ということが、断片的に行われていて、なかなかそのコミットして、臨床試験に取り入れられるということがなく、一部の患者さんが単発的に参画するというようなことが多いです。ですけれども、私たちは、患者を教育をして、で、その臨床試験に対して、その企画段階から関与して、そして患者さんをその臨床試験とか研究にリクルートするところまで進めるっていうんですかね。リクルートして、で、その研究を支えていくっていうところまで、患者会としてサポートするということを、一元的にやることを考えています。で、これを、成果というものを、チェックボックスで、評価してもらえるっていうことは、やはり客観的な視点を持つことができるということで、患者としても非常にありがたいことだと思います。
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hiromi-san, for sharing your experience and a bit more on your perspective and what is needed, especially within the Japanese community, to continue fostering the efforts that you are already driving within the region. So I'm going to now move to our next speaker, who can help us transition from a patient perspective to a regulatory perspective, coming from both insights. So I'm talking, of course, about you, Maria. You currently work at EMA, but I know your background is very diverse, and that gives you a very good ability to help our audience see things from diverse perspectives. So I know you have experience both within patient organizations and regulatory bodies specifically. So could you please share with us, how do you think that the European regulatory framework has impacted patient engagement in the design of clinical trials? And I know that you've been working a lot on demonstrating the value of patient engagement. So could you share with us, what is the value of patient engagement and how do we make sure that people are aware of it?
Thank you, Eleonora. That's a question with a couple of different parts. But if I tackle the regulatory framework first, I think in Europe, at least the regulation that we call 726/2004 has an article in there that states that the regulators can consult patients, that the committees that are parts of the European Medicines Agency can consult and involve patients. And a lot of what we do is really based on that. There are also other regulations that began, for example, stimulated by the Orphan Drug Act in the United States. There was the Orphan Regulation in the European Union that for the first time included patients as full members of the Orphan Committee, the COMP. Every subsequent regulation that came out with the creation of a new committee, the Pediatric Committee, the Advanced Therapy Committee, and the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, or our Safety Committee, also included patients and healthcare professionals as full voting members. So I think here we see that the impact, the importance of and the experience of individual patients and also healthcare professionals impacting in regulation and seeing that as an important element. And this is not just a tick box. Myself, my interest, of course, and I should say actually that with the orphan regulation here in Europe, it was really the rare disease community that was pushing for this and included the idea of having patients as full members of the committee. And this is also an important message, I think. think, because even within the European Medicines Agency, there's been a lot of actions that have really come from the fact that the patient organizations and big patient groups or even smaller patient groups have pushed for this. And it goes back to what Jan has said as well about listening and engaging in a dialogue and making sure that we listen to each other. The regulatory world is quite fixed. Within that, we try to find flexibility, but we understand that it can be perceived as quite inflexible from the outside. But I think what we've tried to do, and as you said, I did work at a patient organization before coming here to the EMA, and within that, I can see the attempts at flexibility, but the involvement of patients all along the regulatory process is absolutely not a tick box. Now, getting to what you were asking me about the added value, we have conducted a study where we looked specifically at scientific advice. And this is where we involve patients in very early dialogue with the pharmaceutical companies. If there is a meeting that's held or otherwise, the patients get to review the development plan of the companies and put their comments in and bring their comments about the development, whether that's the population, the feasibility of the trial, the comparator, the endpoint selected. And we've published a study on this where we have shown that in around 20% of cases that the input from the patients actually impacted the advice that was given to the companies. Now, I go back to something that Jan said, because that really struck me. He said, about the patient input influencing output. What we also found in this study is that in greater than 80% of the cases, the patients actually agreed with a development plan. And I think this is an important element to take into account as well, that it's not just changing something that is impactful, but it's also looking at it, understanding it, agreeing with it. So training, again, is important, and Jan nicely outlined some of the training initiatives that are available. So we also, in our survey, looked at what was the added value. And of course, the most obvious added value was bringing a perspective that was very different to the regulators and to the scientists and healthcare professionals that are there. And that's something that is hard to put a value on, but there's an added value in bringing a very different perspective to these discussions, to these regulatory and scientific discussions. So this is a study that we're continuing. Of course, there's also other elements, lots of other activities where we are trying to measure or gauge what is the added value and the impact, but this is not a one size fits all. So everything has to be looked at in a different way. And you look at the activity and you say, okay, here, for example, we've had the influence of consulting patient organizations on the final assessment report. There is now amendments made to the final assessment report from the committee that evaluates the benefits and risks, where they will actually detail this is the patient input, patient organization input, and healthcare professional organization input. So we also consider that an impactful achievement as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria, for providing this very broad perspective and bringing together the regulatory and the patient environment somehow in a way that it should be the norm, but we acknowledge there is a common effort needed there. And we thank you a lot for your efforts. So I'm gonna now move to similar efforts in a different region. So we're gonna be looking at the regulatory landscape in Japan instead. And for this, I'm gonna ask for the help of Sean. So Dr. Tezuka or Sean, I know that PMDA, which is the regulatory agency in Japan, has made significant progress in patient engagement, especially in the later stages. And I would be very curious for you to share a bit more around how are you working to further enhance the opportunities for patients to contribute and for patients' voices to be heard throughout the clinical trials process, and what is the role that you would envision in the end for patients moving forward within the process?
Okay, first, thank you for your positive message about PMDA's patient engagement activity. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce PMDA. PMDA is the unique agency among regulatory agencies. In that, PMDA integrates three core functions under one organization. First, review of new drug and medical devices. Everyone can easily imagine. Second, post-market safety surveillance. Third, relief system for serious adverse health effects. especially in safety division and relief division. Due to the nature of the division, patient voices are relatively incorporated into PMDA's work. On the other hand, as for review and scientific advice, I know this is today's topic. Our opportunities for incorporating patient voice are very limited. And actually, in the committee for final decision of approval, 2 members from patient advocate groups and patient groups regularly join and give us unexpected, in a good sense, unexpected important comments, especially about administration of drugs. Of course, I am not satisfied with this situation. Ideally, at the earlier stage of drugs, like EMA. Of course, I'm at the earlier phase, we should incorporate patient input into our work. But unfortunately, this cannot be achieved soon. We should prepare training course for patients to understand the system about review of new drug and medical device and to make their comment as representatives. Before that, it is very basic, but we should enhance awareness of patient engagement and emphasize that PMDA needs actually patient voices. I think patient engagement should not be only momentum, passing flat, but sustainable. For sustainable patient engagement, opportunities for opinion exchange, conversation are basic element. While there have been some experience for exchange of opinions with patient groups in the past, both the number of participants from patients and PMDA has been very limited, and the content has often remained conceptual and merely consisted of petitions. We have lacked opportunities for mutual opinion exchange about patient daily challenges, what patient traveled with in daily life. These activities are simple, I know, but based on patient engagement, because such opinion exchange could motivate patients to talk with PMDA more and motivate PMDA staff to talk with patients more. This is why we are now kicking off not one-sided, but mutual, concrete, and sustainable opinion exchange series. Disease by disease. Sorry for long talk again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for so much also for letting us know what is the current state and what is an ideal state that you envision and are working towards. I found it very insightful to see what is the progress that was made, but also the awareness on the collective effort still needed to ensure that patients' voices are heard and are primary. And with this final sentence, I'm going to take a chance to connect to our final panelist for the day, not for importance, of course, Caroline. So Caroline, I know your work focuses a lot on driving meaningful engagement of people with lived experience and making sure that people with lived experience are heard. So could you explain a bit more around the importance of involving people with lived experience in shaping research priorities and how this helps somehow co-create clinical trials that can truly respond to patient needs? So how do we move beyond the checklist and go into co-creation with patients where their voice is heard and primarily heard?
Thanks so much. So yeah, my work is a little bit different. So I don't really work so much in clinical trials specifically, but more broadly about meaningful engagement in research, implementation, and policy. And I think it's key to link all of that together, and how, again, we move from this box to tick to it's really a fundamental shift in power. I think when we engage people living with and affected by cancer early as partners and not so much as participants. We move from research that is for people to designing research with them. And that shift leads to more relevant questions, improved recruitment, and outcomes that actually truly matter to the people living with the disease. In my work with the World Health Organization, in the framework of meaningful engagement of people with lived experience, we are developing a toolkit to measure meaningful engagement as well, to support the work of Laureline and other people in how people can ensure that the involvement of people with lived experience isn't just symbolic, but that it's structured and it's resourced and that there's evaluation as well. And this toolkit will be a step towards accountability and toward embedding engagement as a core component of research, design, and implementation. I think we need this transformation in mindset and in structure. And, instead of seeking validation after the fact, we must embed co-creation, not merely confirmation, into how research is developed, governed, and evaluated. And this is, we need to create more space for people with lived experience to contribute meaning, not just as storytellers, not just as confirmers, but as experts in their own right. And their lived experience realities can really expose the broader structural and social inequities that influence health behaviors, treatment adherence, and survivorship. And these insights are really critical to building more equitable, people-centered research.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you so much for beautifully closing this panel discussion with the key insights and highlighting once again the importance of really understanding patients and listening to patients and making sure that their voice is the first one heard and given importance. So I see there is a lot of engagement in the chat, and I know you would all love to keep on listening to our panelists for the rest of the day probably, but we would also love to hear from you. So I'm going to invite you, if there is any pending question by the end of the session that we were not able to address and that you really want to ask our speakers, please share it with us through the PEOF email that I just sent in the chat, and we will make sure to get your questions to our speakers so that we can get back to you. But now I'm going to ask my colleague Clementine to share her screen, because we would really want to give you a platform to share. And you're going to do that with our panelists. So you will be helped by each and every one of them and an extra person that will support us that I'm going to introduce in a second. But we're moving into co-creation. And for that, please make sure to select the correct speaking language on your Zoom captions. These will help you with subtitles. So on the bottom of your screen, you have the captions option. Please activate translation and select your speaking language, which may be either English or Japanese, or if you're speaking any other language, feel free to test the tool. And then your caption language. So what is the language you want to receive translation into? Why? Because this is the only tool that works in breakout rooms. So you're not going to have the full chat as you had in the main plenary, but we still have captions to leverage. And our speakers and our support can help you in case you're struggling with that. So let me quickly explain you how the co-creation will look like. So we will look into the pathway that Laureline has walked us through at the beginning of the session. And we will be split into 4 groups. So we're going to create random groups where each one of you will be asked to focus on one of the 4 phases of the clinical trials pathway. And together with a couple of speakers for each group, we will look into how can patient engagement happen at that specific stage? What is the advantage that you see for patient engagement, either current or future advantages? So what is the long-term impact that patient engagement can have if it happens in that specific stage of the clinical trials pathway? And if you're aware of any existing good case practices, we would love to hear them from you. As much as you will focus only on one step, we will use a tool that is called Group Map that our team will help you navigate. So don't worry about technology yet. This tool will help you look at the insights that every single group is writing and also comment on other groups. So as much as your discussion will focus on one specific step, we would love to hear your insights if you have them on additional steps. We would love to hear your thoughts on what other people are sharing in the group map. So you can feel free, we will leave it open, and you can feel free to even go back to it later on and keep on contributing to it. So I would now ask my colleague Clem to get to the slide of the groups, just because there is one more person that will support us here. That is Stefan. Stefan, may I ask you to say a couple of words just to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hi
I see you.
everyone.
There you go.
Thanks for having me. I'm Stefan Gijsels. I'm at the moment chair of the Patient Expert Center and active in a number of patient organizations in lung cancer and Alzheimer's. And I'm co-founder of Digestive Cancers Europe and a patient advocate for the last 10 years.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you so much for helping us moderate the discussion. So I'm gonna stop talking now and leave the floor to each one of you. I will ask my colleague Matt to please send us into breakout groups, and you can see the support person for every group will help you with logistics and everything you need. So I'm gonna see you in... Hi everyone, welcome back. I see everyone is joining back. We are so sorry we had to cut the discussion. We gave it as much time as we could, but it was a very interesting discussion. We're just gonna ask you to stick around with us for 5 extra minutes. As shared in the different breakout groups, we do invite you to please keep on sharing in the group map any insights that you would like to share. Please use our info@PEOF email to share any question or additional insight that you would like to receive in the session follow-up. So now I'm going to quickly call on the stage the different moderators to report on the key highlights from their group. So may I please ask anybody between Caroline and Laureline if you want to share very quickly what are the key insights from your group?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Laureline. So it was very intensive discussions and then quite a lot of comments. For example, it's about research priority. We focused on research priorities. So how to optimize them, such as getting preference studies. Then it helps focus on what patients really want, really need. And then also another point was about education. Educating the patient to make sure the patient representative to make them at a position to discuss equally with the researchers, and then also horizon scanning. So then patient can also be consulted and also discuss about solution together with the researchers. Also defining the question at early stage, and so it's very much and then also one big point was also about getting the right patient to be there, the right patient at the right place. So it's not so easy. So it's very much about finding the best way to involve the patient in a right way. And then there were some examples like good practices, like prostate cancer, and very rare cancer, how there were some very good examples involving patients. I don't know, Caroline.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add one quick thing. I think a lot of the talk was really about, finding the key stakeholders, identifying who those key stakeholders are, and then setting up meaningful engagement by, defining tasks, skills, and expectations. And again, making sure that educational levels were there, and that not putting the onus onto the patient orgs or the patient, but as more of a community effort to build that education process as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So Maria, Sean, any insights from the next group? We really need to move fast, but then everything will be in the output.
Okay, there are many, there are variety of, there are a lot of comment in our group. What I am interested in is how many patient should be involved in designing clinical trial, and advantage at this stage, advantage of engagement at this stage is considering about burden of patient's burden of treatment. But again, many comments in our topic. I I would like to discuss about them in the future. Thank you. And Maria, do you have any additional comment?
No, I agree with you, Shun, that there was a lot of nice discussion, touched on different elements with regard to both perspectives as well. The perspective of the group that's working on the protocol and what they need to get out of patient engagement. One of them was also fewer amendments to the protocol, which is also time saving, and also potentially having facilitation of patient engagement, like translation of the design element of the trial into a lay language so patients could understand. We talked a little bit about training, and as Shun also said, we talked about the numbers, but again, I think that it's worth having a look at some of the comments in the document. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, both. Stefan, Hiromi, may I ask a word from your group as well? Stefan, you're muted if you're
Yes, okay. So we also had lively discussion. I think initially I'd missed the caption side, so I'm not sure I understood everything that was being said. One of the critical things is education, and not only of patients, but also of investigators, to make sure they understand the value of patient engagement, but also train patients to be, sufficiently up to speed to what is needed to fulfill the role. We also discussed the need and the value of having global processes and process descriptions like the one that PFMD has developed that are now also translated into Japanese, so which are really setting the standard for how it can be organized. So I think this is critical to share with as many people as possible, so that as a kind of education material and information material basis to work from. We also mentioned that from a patient perspective, it's sometimes necessary to have different roles in an ethical committee or a steering group of a study. It's people who know the disease very well on the one hand, but then also patient representatives who are really versed into the technical aspects of running a clinical trial. So we don't have to be scientists, but we have to make sure that the perspectives from the patient, the knowledge of the disease, but also perspective on the running of the trial is part of the process. I don't know, Hiromi, whether you want to add something to that.
はい、プラスして、今回の私たちのセッションでは、日本の患者団体がやっている活動なんかをご紹介させていただいておりました。で、その中では、やはりまだまだ日本では患者参画ということができていないですけれども、徐々にその患者参画について、いろいろな団体が試行錯誤しているということについて、ご紹介されました。以上です。
Thank you so much. Ian, Beatriz, may I please ask one word from your side, and then we really close the session, I promise. We're just going to give you another platform to share.
No, absolutely. And I don't want to take your time. We had super discussions about also lay summaries. We had best practice examples from Canada, from Japan, from also other countries like learning institutes where they pair experts and patient scholars to think about disseminating research results. And we had discussions about plain language summaries and so on. And of course, one of the discussions that came up in that short time is how do we maintain independence of the result of that dissemination, that we make sure there is no undue influence from like the manufacturers or anyone else on the information that is being disseminated in terms of study results and lay summaries and so on. So just scratched the surface, but a super important topic and very different, interesting perspectives from different parts of the world. That's all I can do in a minute.
That was perfectly on point, Ian. Thank you so much. So before leaving a final word to Laureline and Beatriz, I just wanted to please ask everyone to reply to a quick MPS question that will pop up on your screen that will let us know if you enjoyed the session. So my colleague Matt will soon launch this survey. You will see it on your screen. You just need to reply from 1 to 10. It's a quick survey. And then may I invite my colleague Emily to introduce herself to the PEOF community and share with you the next touch point of the PEOF community.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Luciani, and I'm a new program director with the Synergist. It's a pleasure to be here today with you. Most of you know my colleague Elizabeth, who has been involved in designing this session and many others with you. So I am here instead of her today, as she had to start her maternity leave a little bit earlier than planned. But I am going to be from now on in touch with you all for everything related to the patient engagement open forum. Today's session was my first, and I am really truly impressed by seeing this amazing collaboration of experts from all over the globe. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, the fruitful contributions. And as Eleonora mentioned, we will get back to you with the outputs and all the resources related to this session. From my end, I hope that I will see some of you probably in June for the face-to-face patient engagement open forum event, and also in upcoming virtual sessions. Which with that, I'll give the floor back to Eleonora to tell us what to expect next. Thank you and nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Emily. So everyone, you can find the link to the next session in the chat. Join us. The topic is gonna be again around the importance of patient engagement and patient experience data, and how do we ensure that measuring things also allows us to drive meaningful engagement. That's a very quick wrap up. Please find out more in the session. Thank you so much for sticking around. I'm gonna leave it to Laurelyn and Beatrice if you wanna say a final goodbye to our audience. But thanks a lot for sticking around, even if we delayed a bit. And we really enjoyed your sharings and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Beatrice, would you like to say a word?
So just one word, thank you. Thank you to all. Thank you all who support us during the project, and thank you to all to support this session. Very interesting session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, also it's the outcome of this session. I can't, yes, thank you all more that the panel discussion and the feedback from everyone, it helps us better understand how and where we can move forward. So it's to build trust and create trials more efficiently. Like there were questions about trainings, there were questions about here. So we know like go to some directions to have a more balanced, now that we've seen we can monitor what's happening where, then we can follow up. So I really hope we can stay in touch, and then if we will move forward, and then anyone keep in touch. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much once again, everyone. So we really let you go now. Thank you for sticking around. Please feel free to reach out, and now the meeting will be brutally closed by one person so that it's quicker. So Matt, the floor is yours to close the meeting.